I put in 3 years for her startup company, but she fired me for the one that got away. Now her empire collapsed, and she's kneeling outside my billion-dollar headquarters, begging for forgiveness. If I didn't love her, I wouldn't have been hurt. On the day of the company annual gala, my CEO girlfriend's first love returned. That day, I watched with my own eyes as my girlfriend excitedly grabbed Julian Thorne's hand, and even got on stage to sing a song in front of everyone. That night, I tried to take a drunk Chloe Dawson home, but she scolded me for being insensitive and unsupportive. Just get out of my sight. Watching her furious expression, my heart gradually grew cold. I had loved this woman for 3 years, but I never expected such an outcome. When I got home, Olivia sent me a video. Chloe Dawson was excitedly holding Julian Thorne's hand, saying, "Julian, I finally waited for you to come back." Watching Chloe Dawson in the video, I knew everything was over. Back in my apartment, watching the video of Chloe Dawson, slightly drunk, constantly telling Julian Thorne about the difficulties of these past years, and how much she missed him, I knew I had lost. All these years, I had been by Chloe Dawson's side. I was the one who followed her, expanding the company little by little. I was also the one risking my health drinking until my stomach bled to help her secure a significant number of deals. She once said she would only ever love me. She also said that after this annual corporate event, she would get married to me. Even yesterday, I was incredibly happy, because I knew the wedding I had always anticipated was about to begin. But now, I know I was wrong. I dialed a phone call I hadn't made in a long time. "Mom, I want to come see you." On the other end of the phone call, my mother was silent for a moment, then said, "Then come back to me. Don't worry, no matter how much hardship you've suffered, I'll be here for you." I choked up. On the other end of the phone call, my mother clearly sensed my distress, and asked if she should come over. She told me that no matter what, she could help me handle it. "Mom, I want to handle it myself. I'll come to you later." I stabilized my emotions and spoke. My mother and I hadn't seen each other in many years. I still remember the day my mother left. It was on a rainy night. My father's the one that got away returned. My father went to see her behind my mother's back, and spent a night with her. When my mother found out, she divorced my father. At that time, I couldn't understand my mother. My father didn't want a divorce, but my mother refused. When I was little, I thought my mother was heartless for leaving us despite my father's and my pleas for her to stay. But now, I understand my mother's feelings. After the phone call with my mother, I was about to go to bed, but then I received another video. This time, it was from Julian Thorne. In the video, Julian Thorne was holding Chloe Dawson, and they were passionately kissing. "Chloe, will you love me forever?" His voice rang out, and the moment I saw Chloe Dawson nod, I felt utterly defeated. All these years, the woman I had tried so hard to please, the woman I thought I would give up everything for, ultimately left me completely broken. Chloe Dawson in the video was smiling at Julian Thorne with a smile I had never seen before. When she faced me, there was only seriousness and coldness. I used to think that was just Chloe Dawson's personality. It turns out I was wrong. From the beginning, Chloe Dawson just didn't want to be like that with me. She gave all her tenderness to Julian Thorne, and what was left for me was only a bit of her seriousness. I fell asleep watching the video. I was too tired. The next morning, when I woke up, I found that Chloe Dawson had come to my apartment at some point. She saw me come out of the room, and greeted me as if nothing had happened. "When I came back last night, you were already asleep, so I slept in the guest room." She pointed to the other room and said, it was as if I had caused her hardship. I didn't speak, just nodded. She looked at me and suddenly said, "I drank too much last night. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." "I know." I nodded and said, "Are you happy to see Julian Thorne?" "Ethan Vance. Julian Thorne and I really have nothing going on." She suddenly spoke to me in a flustered tone, her expression now showing a hint of nervousness. Then she explained, "Last night, Julian was the one who told me you might feel unwell from drinking too much, and asked me to take care of you." She looked at me and said, "He's a very gentle and kind person, don't misunderstand him." I looked at Chloe Dawson in front of me. Normally, when I spoke to Chloe Dawson, she would just respond, and rarely initiate such long conversations, but everything she said was about Julian Thorne. I knew that Chloe Dawson was deeply in love with Julian Thorne. Given that, why should I hold on? "Ethan Vance, didn't I tell you? After the company annual gala, we'll get married." She suddenly turned to look at me, very seriously saying, "Since we are getting married, you can stay home from now on. Our home also needs someone to look after it. You know, the company can't do without me, so you should resign." I was stunned when I heard her say that. The department I was in charge of was the core department of the company and very important. Most of the company's daily operations passed through me. It could be said that if I resigned, the company's operations might even face problems. Over the years, I had realized this problem, so I had been training Olivia. Now, she had taken over many of my responsibilities. Even so, I couldn't leave this position for now, and Chloe Dawson knew that. If I resign, who will take over? I looked at Chloe Dawson and asked. A hint of embarrassment clearly showed on her face. And then she softly said, "Julian just came back. I'm planning to have him take over your department." My eyes widened when I heard her say that. I had known Chloe Dawson for so long, and I had heard about Julian Thorne from others. She studied art abroad. To let someone like that directly take over all my work, was Chloe Dawson out of her mind? At that moment, watching Chloe Dawson with her head down, not daring to look at me, I didn't even have the thought to scold her. "All right then, if that's the case, I can leave." Chloe Dawson clearly didn't expect me to agree so readily, and a look of surprise immediately appeared on her face. "Really? Ethan Vance, I knew you'd agree. Don't worry, we'll get engaged right away." I looked at the overjoyed Chloe Dawson and said nothing more. I returned to the company and discussed my resignation with Chloe Dawson. Over the years, I had dedicated myself to the company. It could be said that the company's success was inseparable from my efforts. Moreover, I had also invested a portion of money in the company. All in all, I was also a minor shareholder in the company. Since Chloe Dawson wanted me to resign, then Chloe Dawson and I had to separate everything clearly. What's more, she had lost her head now, actually letting Julian Thorne sit in that position. If the company ran into problems, no one would be able to take responsibility. The possibility of Chloe Dawson's company going bankrupt was very high. Why would I let them squander my money? Chloe Dawson was stunned when she heard my resignation request. "Ethan Vance, what do you mean?" She seemed extremely angry, staring at me and coldly saying, "Don't you know we are family? We are about to get engaged, and now you are telling me you want to settle things so clearly between us." Her gaze was fixed on me, her eyes filled with anger, and I just looked at her indifferently and said, "Ms. Dawson, let's handle things professionally first. The day we get married, I'll certainly take this money out as my share of the marital assets, but for now, this money is still mine. So, Ms. Dawson, let's handle things professionally. Also, my resignation was at your request, so you need to give me my full severance pay." Her face looked somewhat displeased as she looked at me and said, "We are about to be family. Have you ever seen a family settle things so clearly?" I didn't speak, just looked at her. Anyway, if she didn't agree, I would immediately sell my shares in the company. I couldn't stay in this company for another day. Chloe Dawson looked at me and said helplessly, "I know you're a bit angry that Julian is back, but you can't act like this. Ms. Dawson." I looked at Chloe Dawson and said, "Right now, at the company, we should handle things professionally." I looked at Chloe Dawson and spoke calmly. Before, when I was at the company, I called her Chloe, and occasionally even joked with her. She used to speak to me in that tone. Now, when I spoke to her in that tone, she immediately froze. "What if I don't give it to you?" She stared at me and asked, then, "Ms. Dawson, please issue my termination papers and transfer my severance pay, otherwise, I will apply for labor arbitration." I spoke coldly. Her face immediately changed when she heard my words. I didn't speak, just looked at her. I knew she was very conflicted now. On one hand, she didn't want to give me such a large sum of money, especially buying out my shares, which for her meant taking away most of her cash. As for the severance pay, for my position, the severance pay was quite substantial, but what did that have to do with me? I no longer loved this woman, so why should I sacrifice everything for her? She had lost her head now, and I certainly couldn't manage her. Chloe Dawson was currently struggling with her decision. I stood up and said, "Ms. Dawson, I'll wait for your phone call. I'm going home for now." After I finished speaking, I left Chloe Dawson's office directly. As I left, I saw Julian Thorne. He was outside Chloe Dawson's office, and when he saw me, he looked at me with a provocative gaze. I knew that the video last night was deliberately sent to me, and he had Chloe Dawson come to my apartment just to make us argue. Now, I no longer had any desire to argue with him. I returned to my office, and Olivia rushed in. "Ethan, I heard you were leaving." Olivia asked nervously. "How did you know?" I was surprised. Chloe Dawson had only told me about this morning, and we hadn't even settled it yet. "Julian Thorne came here early this morning, and said he was taking over your position," Olivia said somewhat helplessly. "Ethan, our Ms. Dawson." "Yes," she agreed. "Also, Ms. Dawson and I have nothing to do with each other anymore." I knew what Olivia wanted to say. At the same time, I looked at Olivia and said, "Go get busy. I might not be your supervisor anymore." When Olivia heard this, she gritted her teeth and said, "Ethan, where are you going?" "I'm coming with you." I smiled when I heard this and said, "We'll see about that later." After she left, my expression became exceptionally grim. Julian Thorne had arrived in the morning, undoubtedly determined to drive me out. Moreover, he had just gone to see Chloe Dawson, surely to ask about the progress of this matter. I knew that for the sake of the one that got away, Chloe Dawson would certainly agree. Indeed, just before closing time, Chloe Dawson arrived, this time accompanied by Julian Thorne. "Ethan Vance, you are so worthless. How can you force Chloe like this? Are you even a man?" Julian Thorne pointed at me and cursed. "You know Chloe is in trouble, and you are still demanding so much money from her. Ms. Dawson, it seems you have no intention of buying my shares." I turned and looked at Chloe Dawson, saying, "Since that's the case, Ms. Dawson, I'll find a buyer then." Hearing this, Chloe Dawson's expression changed. She had thought that by bringing Julian Thorne to make a scene, I would give her my shares out of spite towards Julian Thorne from the beginning. Chloe Dawson might have planned it this way. Now that I wasn't taking the bait, and was preparing to sell the shares, she panicked. "Fine, I'll buy them." Chloe Dawson gritted her teeth and looked at me. I nodded, and then looked at Chloe Dawson, saying, "Ms. Dawson, what about my severance pay? You'll get that too." She took a deep breath and said, "Just like that, Chloe Dawson," and I completed the handover procedures. At the same time, I had a lawyer draft the contract, and received a large sum of money. I looked at Chloe Dawson's displeased face without speaking. Julian Thorne, standing by, also had an unpleasant expression on his face, but that was no longer important. "Ethan Vance, come home with me tonight, my mom wants to see you." She suddenly turned to me and said. Hearing this, I nodded. I had met Chloe Dawson's mother a few times. At first, she wasn't satisfied with me. My father passed away when I was in my teens. At that time, I was still unwilling to forgive my mother, so I hadn't gone to find her. Everyone thought I was an orphan, and an orphan like me certainly didn't deserve Chloe Dawson. Patricia Dawson naturally looked down on me. It wasn't until Chloe Dawson and I developed the company more and more that her attitude towards me improved. Since I had already decided to leave, this dinner tonight would be my last meal with them. When I arrived at the Dawson residence, Chloe Dawson and Julian Thorne were already there. Julian Thorne spoke a lot with Patricia Dawson. Patricia Dawson was clearly very pleased by Julian Thorne, praising how good he was. When she saw me enter, Patricia Dawson's expression turned a bit sour. She waved me over and started chatting with me. "Ethan Vance, I actually don't like you, but Chloe does, and you are quite capable." Patricia Dawson suddenly spoke, saying, "Otherwise, with your family background, you wouldn't be worthy of our Chloe." I didn't speak, taking Patricia Dawson's words as an acknowledgement, as I was going to leave after this meal anyway. "Chloe told me you sold your shares, and took a large sum of money. How could you do that?" Patricia Dawson looked at me, speaking with a hint of blame. "You also need to be considerate of Chloe. It's not easy for her, and you are about to get married to Chloe. Isn't your money the same? Listen to me, tomorrow, I'll have a lawyer draft a transfer agreement, and you'll transfer all the money in your hands to Chloe." Hearing this, I sneered. Just one sentence, and she wanted me to give all my money to their family. In the past, I loved Chloe Dawson and thought we would be family, so I truly didn't see it then. Now, I had just sold my shares, and their family was already plotting against me. What a good scheme, I thought to myself, outwardly agreeable, but remained silent. At the dinner table, Patricia Dawson belittled me while praising Julian Thorne's excellence. I quietly ate my meal, and after finishing, I excused myself and left. After leaving the Dawson residence, I made a phone call to a few friends, telling them I was leaving. They evidently knew about Julian Thorne's return, and didn't ask much else, only telling me to reach out if I needed help. After hanging up the phone call, I went home to pack, booked a plane ticket directly, and flew out that same night. My mother personally picked me up at the airport, and took me back to her residence. The next morning, I received a phone call from Chloe Dawson. "Ethan Vance, where did you go? Why is there nothing left in your apartment?" Her voice was urgent, demanding loudly, "Chloe Dawson, we are over. From now on, you don't need to bother me." I said, "Ethan Vance, what do you mean? You are breaking up with me. We are about to get married." On the other end of the phone call, Chloe Dawson immediately raged, "Chloe Dawson, you should get married to Julian Thorne." I said coolly, "Ethan Vance, you've misunderstood. Julian Thorne, and I really have nothing going on." She panicked, speaking to me anxiously. However, I was no longer interested in listening. Her affection for Julian Thorne was clear to me. Moreover, her being with me was probably more because of my capabilities, or perhaps because of the money I held. Regardless, Chloe Dawson and I were over. I completely ignored Chloe Dawson's shouting, and hung up the phone call. Now, I had given up on this woman, and naturally didn't want to bother with her anymore. Seeing that I was unhappy, my mother took me out for a few days. She asked me to join her company, saying that ever since she left, she had been alone, and all her properties were originally meant to be handed over to me. I gladly accepted. My mother's company was even larger than the Dawson's Places company. I quickly became familiar with it, and took over all of its operations. A few months later, I had gradually taken over various operations of the company. My mother was exceptionally confident in my abilities. She said she was at an age to retire and would hand the company over to me. That day, I received a phone call from Olivia. "Ethan, I'm unemployed." Hearing this, I was somewhat surprised. After I left Chloe Dawson's company, Julian Thorne took over my position, and Olivia, my assistant, was the most capable. If even she resigned, then many things at the company would not be able to function. Logically, Chloe Dawson shouldn't have fired her. What happened? I asked with curiosity. "Ethan, you don't know, after you left, Julian Thorne took over our department, and he didn't understand anything. He just kept ordering us to do things, and if we made even a slight mistake, or didn't do something perfectly, he would curse at us in the office." On the other end of the phone call, Olivia sounded extremely exasperated. "When I was there, I handled many of the more difficult tasks myself. Now, Julian Thorne didn't do anything but forced them to work, even setting many demands and targets for them. Many of these demands and targets were impossible for them to meet. Julian Thorne didn't care. If they couldn't complete them, he would start cursing and then fire them." Many people had already resigned, leaving the entire department in a state of panic. Chloe Dawson didn't do anything about it. I was a bit surprised. During the years Chloe Dawson and I were together, although I handled many of the company's affairs, she should have known the importance of this position. Now, Julian Thorne had ruined it to this extent. Ms. Dawson has gone somewhere. No one has seen her for over a month, and she's not even managing the company's affairs anymore. On the other end of the phone call, Olivia said softly. Hearing this, I was somewhat surprised. Since she had resigned, I asked her to come work at my company. At the same time, I told her that if her former colleagues didn't have a good place to go, they could come with her. She quickly replied that she would bring people over. I hadn't expected that because of this, Chloe Dawson would come looking for me. She couldn't find me initially, but when so many people resigned at once, and came to work for me, she immediately discovered my whereabouts. The day when I left work, I saw Chloe Dawson standing downstairs at the company. Compared to a few months ago, she looked exceptionally disheveled, her hair messy, her face pale, and her eyes bloodshot. Her clothes were even wrinkled, making her look somewhat unkempt. At that moment, my previous certainty about Chloe Dawson's attractiveness collapsed. At least, in my eyes, she no longer had any of the charm that once attracted me. I looked at her coldly, while she looked at me excitedly, and said, "Ethan Vance, I finally found you." Saying that, she rushed to my side, grabbed me, and said, "Ethan Vance, come back with me, let's start over. I don't even mind that you betrayed me." She held my hand and said, "Chloe Dawson, when did I betray you?" Hearing this, I looked at her, somewhat exasperated, and she quickly said, pulling my hand, "Ethan Vance, I've found out everything. The owner of this company is an old woman, and you went with this old woman. I don't mind your betrayal, as long as you come back." She looked at me and said, and I laughed, exasperated. I had never imagined that Chloe Dawson would look at me with such eyes. Chloe Dawson, I'm not as despicable as you think. What's more, we've already broken up, so there's no betrayal, I said coldly. Chloe Dawson's face immediately became exceptionally grim. She stared at me and asked, Ethan Vance, how long are you going to keep this up? I told you, Julian Thorne and I have nothing going on, don't you understand? Even if I betrayed you because of Julian Thorne, you also cheated and betrayed me. She loudly accused me, as if I were the one who had committed an unforgivable sin, and I sighed. At this moment, Chloe Dawson looked like a madwoman, and I was powerless to continue talking to her. Chloe Dawson, I didn't cheat, nor did I betray you, I merely saw through your true colors. You and your mother were both eyeing my money, and you wanted me to work like a dog for your family, weren't you? I said with a sneer. What's more, you love Julian Thorne, you are just unwilling to accept that you didn't get my money. Chloe Dawson, go home. I looked at Chloe Dawson helplessly and said, if you keep following me, I'll call the police. I told you, Julian Thorne, and I have nothing. If you don't like him at the company, I can make him leave, and we can go back to how things were. Chloe Dawson looked at me anxiously, and said, and I shook my head. She thought everything could be undone as if it never happened. But I couldn't do that, seeing my refusal. She suddenly had an emotional breakdown. Ethan Vance, why are you treating me like this? What makes me inferior to that old woman? She screamed furiously. Just then, my mother arrived. She walked up to me and asked, what's going on? At the same time, my mother met Chloe Dawson's gaze. Chloe Dawson was almost frantic at this point. She stared intently at my mother, her eyes filled with rage. Is this the girl you used to like? My mother looked at Chloe Dawson, her eyes cold. She had long known about Chloe Dawson, and seeing how heartbroken I was when I returned, she couldn't help but want to teach Chloe Dawson a lesson, but I had stopped her. Now, as she looked at Chloe Dawson, the anger in her eyes was completely unconcealed. I am Chloe Dawson, Ethan Vance's fiancée. Chloe Dawson looked coldly at my mother, and said, you are this old, and you are still seducing my fiancé. Is that appropriate? Her words stunned my mother. Then, my mother showed a smile and looked at me, saying, has she lost her mind? Forget it, I have nothing to say to this kind of person, have her removed. My mother shook her head and ordered the bodyguards behind her to remove Chloe Dawson. Chloe Dawson tried to struggle, but my mother's bodyguards simply threw her out. I thought that after all this, she wouldn't come looking for me anymore, right? But I didn't expect her to come again just half a month later. This time, Chloe Dawson came with Patricia Dawson. When the two of them saw me, Chloe Dawson's eyes were slightly red, as if she was about to cry. Patricia Dawson wanted to come forward and grab my hand, but I avoided her. From that day when we had dinner at their house, when the mother and daughter plotted for my money, I understood that neither of them truly approved of me, Ethan Vance. Patricia knows you must still love our Chloe. Patricia Dawson's face showed a hint of awkwardness, as she looked at me and said, Patricia hopes you'll come back and get married to Chloe. Saying that, she turned to Chloe Dawson. Chloe Dawson immediately pulled out a ring from her embrace, looking at me eagerly. Ethan Vance, after these few months without you, I finally understand that you were always the one I loved. Ethan Vance, I hope we can start over. From now on, I'll listen to you in everything. Julian Thorne has already left the company, please come back. She looked at me, her eyes full of deep affection. This scene struck me as ironic. In all the years I was with Chloe Dawson, I always hoped we could get married. I had even imagined countless proposals, replaying this scene in my mind countless times. At that time, I wondered if she would excitedly agree if I proposed to her. Perhaps she would be very happy, even too excited to speak. Now, hearing her propose to me, I felt a wave of disgust. This woman in front of me disgusted me. Ignoring the performance of Chloe Dawson and her mother, I said calmly, enough. Chloe Dawson, we broke up months ago. You were with Julian Thorne, we have no connection anymore. I looked coldly at Chloe Dawson and said, after speaking, I prepared to leave. It was impossible to reason with these two people anymore. She was stunned. When she heard this, Patricia Dawson grabbed my hand, and immediately shouted, Ethan Vance, how can you be like this? You've been with Chloe for so many years, how can you just change your mind? How can you be so heartless? She looked at me and suddenly shouted, everyone, come see. My daughter's fiancé cheated with an old woman and abandoned my daughter. And my daughter loved him so much, she even neglected the company for him. Listening to these words, I coldly looked at the mother and daughter in front of me. When my mother arrived after hearing the commotion, the Dawsons were telling passersby how shameless I was. Around us, many self-proclaimed moralists began to criticize me. Seeing my mother appear, Patricia Dawson lunged at her. "I'll beat you to death, you old hag. You vile woman, seducing my daughter's fiancé. Don't you even look at your age?" She angrily tried to rush forward, but was restrained by my mother's bodyguards. Chloe Dawson also looked at my mother with hatred. I was fed up with them. "Chloe Dawson, this is my mother." I coldly stared at Chloe Dawson and said, "My birth mother." She and Patricia Dawson both froze, clearly not expecting my mother to still be alive, and to be a renowned wealthy individual at that. The murmuring and pointing from the surrounding crowd immediately ceased. They awkwardly retreated as if nothing had happened. "Call the police," my mother said coldly. Subsequently, Chloe Dawson and her mother were taken away by the police. Olivia then rushed over to tell me that Chloe Dawson's company was in big trouble. It turned out that during the months Chloe Dawson neglected the company, Julian Thorne had stolen most of the company's funds and then fled. By the time Chloe Dawson returned to the company, it was too late. Julian Thorne had run off, and her company was facing enormous debts. She was bankrupt, so the mother and daughter had set their sights on me again. However, they didn't realize that the old woman they thought was keeping me was my mother. Chloe Dawson and her mother were fined for disorderly conduct and left dejectedly. She knew there was no point in coming after me again. The mother and daughter didn't bother me anymore. I, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. A few days later, Olivia told me that after Chloe Dawson returned to the company, she was pressured by a group of creditors and climbed onto the rooftop. She jumped from the rooftop and met a gruesome end. Patricia Dawson, unable to bear the shock, also passed away. When I heard this news, I smiled faintly and said, "Let's go. Time for the meeting." What happened to Chloe Dawson was no longer my concern.